Victor Sullivan's hand jerked as his son tugged at his sleeve, and the full champagne flute tipped, splashing all over the shimmering silver gown of the woman behind him. "Oh no, oh my God," Victor spun around, already reaching for a napkin, his face pale. "I am so sorry, I wasn't looking." "My son just," the woman stared down at her soaked dress, blinked once and then looked up. Her expression wasn't anger, it was amusement. "Well," she said calmly, brushing a strand of wavy dark hair behind her ear. "That's one way to make an impression." Victor froze, his mind scrambling to form words as his 6-year-old son, Parker, peeked around his leg with wide eyes. "I'm really sorry," Victor said again, rubbing the back of his neck. "I shouldn't have brought him, but I didn't have a sitter and he's quiet usually. This was a huge mistake." The woman's lips curved into a soft smile. "It's fine, really. She wasn't just beautiful, she was stunning." Her eyes were a sharp, clear green, her cheekbones high, her posture graceful, even soaked in champagne. She looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Victor felt like he'd just spilled Prosecco on royalty. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning," he added quickly. She laughed. Victor didn't. "No, seriously, I can't let this go. That dress looks expensive." "It is," she said. He winced. "But it's not ruined," she added, her tone lighter now, "and honestly, I hated it anyway. Too shiny." Victor blinked. "Still, I feel terrible." "Then maybe let me get you a fresh glass," she offered. He frowned. "I spilled the drink on you, and now you owe me a conversation," she replied, grabbing 2 new flutes from a passing tray and handing him one. "What's your name?" "Victor." "Victor Sullivan." "Raya Carter." He nearly choked on the sip he took. "Wait, Raya Carter, as in Carter Industries." She tilted her head, amused. "You've heard of it." He nearly dropped the glass again. "Heard of it? You're like one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Real estate tech. You're on the cover of Forbes. And now champagne," she added, pointing to the wet spot on her shoulder. Victor groaned. "I am so out of place here." Raya leaned in a little. "So am I." Victor glanced down at Parker, who was now sitting quietly on a velvet bench with a juice box someone must have handed him. "I really shouldn't have brought him. I just couldn't afford a sitter tonight. I needed this job." "You're working this," he nodded. "I helped with the lighting and AV setup. Got me into the room, but it's not exactly my scene." "And the suit?" "Borrowed." She smiled again, and something in her eyes softened. "I'm sorry I ruined your night," Victor said, truly meaning it. "You didn't. You made it more interesting." He looked at her like she'd just spoken a different language. "I spilled a drink on your designer gown. And now you're going to tell me more about yourself," she replied, sipping her champagne. "Because I've been bored out of my mind all evening, and this is the most fun I've had in weeks." Victor blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely." He glanced back at Parker, who gave him a thumbs up with orange-stained fingers. Victor turned back to Raya, half laughing. "All right. But only if you tell me why a billionaire's bored at a black tie gala." They sat at the edge of the ballroom, away from the glittering crowd. Victor talked about Parker, about how he used to be an engineer but got laid off a year ago, about how finding work while raising a kid alone had been a nightmare. Raya listened, really listened, and when he asked about her, she didn't talk about net worth or business deals. She talked about her mom, who raised her alone in a small apartment in Queens before lightning struck and her startup took off. "You ever feel like you just don't belong here?" Victor asked, watching the chandelier lights reflect off his borrowed shoes. "All the time," she said, her voice softer now. "But tonight, I kind of do." They talked for nearly an hour, and it didn't feel like a billionaire and a broke dad. It felt like 2 people who saw each other clearly for the first time in a long time. Eventually, she glanced down at her now dried dress. "You owe me a dinner." Victor blinked. "I do. Dry cleaning costs. I'm calling in the debt in the form of food." He laughed. "I can't afford the places you usually eat at." "Who said I wanted fancy?" He raised an eyebrow. "You're a billionaire." "I like burgers." Victor looked at her cautiously. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He exhaled a shaky breath. "Okay, dinner, but I have to drop Parker off at his grandma's first." "Deal." Just before they parted ways, she crouched in front of Parker. "You did great tonight, buddy," Parker grinned. "My dad likes you." Raya's eyes flicked up to Victor's. "Does he?" Victor flushed. He has a wild imagination." She laughed again, that low, rich sound that made Victor's chest ache. Well, tell him he's not wrong, she said, rising to her feet. Victor walked them to the exit, still not sure how he'd gone from apologizing for ruining her night to completely not wanting it to end. As she stepped into the back of a sleek black car, she turned back for a second. Don't forget. You owe me dinner. I won't, he said quietly, and he meant it, because for the first time in years, Victor felt something he hadn't felt in too long: hope. Victor stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the taillights of the sleek car disappear into the traffic beyond the marble steps of the venue. He adjusted the strap of Parker's overnight bag on his shoulder, still trying to process what had just happened. Raya Carter hadn't just forgiven him for the mess she'd asked him to dinner. With him. By the next evening, Victor was pacing outside a quiet corner diner in Brooklyn, the kind of place with cracked red booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't even clean in places, but it was where he felt real. And if Raya had meant what she said about burgers, then this was the best he could offer. She arrived exactly on time. Not in a chauffeur-driven car, but alone, stepping out of a yellow cab in jeans, white sneakers, and a navy trench coat cinched at the waist. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, not a jewel in sight. Still, she looked like she belonged on the cover of something expensive. Victor opened the door for her. Didn't expect you to actually show. I said I would, she said, brushing a breeze-kissed strand from her face. And I keep my word. Inside, the waitress gave them the usual nod and led them to Victor's regular booth in the back. He slid into the vinyl seat across from her, watching her scan the laminated menu like it was written in another language. I've never been here, she said, her tone unreadable. Didn't think so. Is it weird that I'm nervous about ordering a milkshake only if you're scared of chocolate? She lifted an eyebrow. What if I'm more of a strawberry girl? Then I'll pretend not to judge you. She laughed, and the tension between them thinned. Once their food arrived, Raya leaned forward, dipping a fry into the ketchup. So, what made you pick engineering? Victor wiped his hands on a paper napkin. Honestly, I liked building things that lasted. I grew up fixing cars with my uncle in a freezing garage. I guess I just liked knowing that something broken could be put back together stronger. Her expression shifted, not pity interest. Do you miss it? Every day. Why not go back? Not that simple. He paused. The job market's brutal. And when you're the sole parent, you can't afford to gamble on maybe. You need a sure thing. She nodded slowly, then glanced down at her untouched burger. I never had to think like that. My world's all risk. Risk is a game you play with other people's money. Victor set his cup down. Is that why you looked like you wanted to vanish at that gala? She tilted her head. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. I'm not anyone. No, you're not. Silence stretched between them, not awkward but full. He studied her for a long moment. What about your world makes you want out? She took a slow breath. The higher you go, the more people expect you to be someone else. I'm always aware of which smile I'm supposed to wear, which answer will close the deal, which version of me they want. Victor leaned in. And which version are you right now? She met his gaze. The one I don't usually let out. He cleared his throat. So this version, would she want to come back here, maybe next week? If the strawberry milkshake doesn't kill her. She smiled, not the polished kind, the practiced kind he'd seen her wear at the gala. This one cracked something in him he didn't know had been sealed shut. I think she might. When they stepped outside, the wind had picked up. Victor shrugged off his jacket and offered it to her. She accepted it without hesitation. You don't have to walk me, she said as they reached the corner. I'll be fine. I know, he said, but I want to. They walked in silence, the city humming around them. When they reached the street where she'd hailed the cab earlier, she turned to him. Victor? Yeah. This was the first time in months I didn't feel like I was performing. He looked down at her, that same quiet awe from the gala sparking again. Maybe that's because you weren't. She hesitated for a moment, then rose onto her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. It was brief, but it landed with the weight of something that could grow into everything. Good night, she whispered. He watched her get into the cab and disappear into the night again. But this time, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a beginning. Victor was elbow-deep in wires beneath a conference stage when his phone buzzed. He nearly dropped the soldering iron as he slid it from his pocket, brushing dust off the screen with the back of his hand. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Victor. A familiar voice met his ear. Are you always this formal, or just when you're covered in electrical tape? He sat up too fast and bumped his head on the underside of the platform. Raya, don't sound so surprised, she said, her voice light. You gave me your number, didn't you? Yeah, I just didn't think you'd actually, how did you get this number? You wrote it on a crumpled napkin. I kept it. Also, I have people who can find anyone, she added, teasing. He laughed under his breath, rubbing the back of his head. Well. What can I do for you? I want to show you something. Tonight, he glanced at the clock on the wall. I've got Parker unless my neighbor's free to watch him. I already called her. She said yes, he blinked. Wait, what? You once told me you needed a sure thing. So I called in a few favors and made this one easy for you. He didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. You're unbelievable. I get that a lot, she said. Be outside your building at 7, dress warm. The line went dead. Victor spent the rest of the afternoon trying to figure out what in the world he'd just agreed to. By the time 7 rolled around, Parker was happily building a cardboard fort in the neighbor's living room, and Victor was standing on the curb in his old coat, wondering why his heart hadn't stopped pounding since the call. A black SUV pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Raya was already inside. He slid in beside her. You always this mysterious? Only when it works. The SUV glided through the city, away from the usual spots. Victor kept glancing at her, trying to read her expression, but she was looking out the window, eyes distant. Finally, the car slowed in front of a long, low building tucked between 2 warehouses. There was no sign, just a keycard panel and a steel door. She led him inside. The space was massive industrial floors, wide open walls, and in the center, tucked beneath a canopy of exposed beams and soft lights, stood a half-assembled playground. Bright plastic slides, rope ladders, and climbing walls lay scattered around it like puzzle pieces. Victor stepped forward, stunned. What is this? A project I've been funding quietly, she said. Community centers in underfunded neighborhoods. This one's not open yet. I thought you might want to help finish it. He turned slowly. Why me? Because you build things that last. And because I've seen what you're capable of, even when no one's watching. He walked toward a stack of wooden panels, running his fingers along the grain. You want me to work for you? No, I want to work with you. She stepped closer. I don't need another employee. I need someone who gives a damn. Victor looked at her, really looked at her. You could have hired anyone. I didn't want anyone. A silence settled between them, heavy with something unspoken. He finally asked, why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only see my last name. Her voice dropped. I want something real, and when I'm around you, I don't feel like I'm pretending. He took a step closer. That's a dangerous thing to say to someone who's barely holding it together. I'm not here for safe, she said. I'm here for honest. Victor's hand found hers without thinking. Then you should know this scares the hell out of me. Good, she whispered. Means it matters. They stood there in the middle of a half-built playground beneath rows of dim work lights, fingers intertwined, no champagne, no suits, no audience, just them. She glanced up at him, brows lifting. So, still judging me for liking strawberry milkshakes, he chuckled. Only a little. Her smile faded into something softer. You know this won't be easy. Nothing worth it ever is. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old steel door. Inside, it was warm, the kind of warmth that didn't come from heaters or lights, but from possibility. She pulled her hand back gently. Come by tomorrow. I'll send the plans. You can make changes if you want. You're trusting me with that. I already do. As the car took him home, Victor didn't look out the window. He stared at his hands, instead hands that had once built engines, then bottle warmers, then resumes that no one read. Now they might build something more. And someone, for the first time in years, believed they could. Victor stood outside the newly completed community center, the late spring sun casting long shadows across the freshly painted mural on the brick wall. Kids were already pouring in through the wide doors, their laughter bouncing off the sidewalk. The playground he'd helped build had real weight now, wood and bolts and color, but also something harder to name. It was the first thing he'd built in years that didn't just exist, it mattered. He hadn't seen Raya in 4 days. She hadn't disappeared exactly. She'd sent site plans, forwarded grant approvals, and coordinated a press-free ribbon cutting. But she hadn't shown up in person. Each morning, Victor told himself it was because she trusted him to handle it. Each night, he wondered if it was something else. He adjusted the collar of his shirt and stepped inside. The space was alive, music playing low, tables stacked with books and snacks, kids running from activity to activity. Every detail had been designed with care, and every one of them had her fingerprints on it. He was walking past the art room when a familiar voice caught his attention. "There you are." Raya stood near the windows, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hair tied back with a red ribbon. She was helping a little girl hang paper lanterns from the ceiling. When she turned to him, her eyes were tired but steady. "You've been hiding," he said. "I've been working." He nodded slowly. "You always work from the shadows." She walked toward him, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Only when I'm scared of the light." He frowned. "Why?" She leaned against the windowsill. "Because I've never had something I didn't control. I know how to run companies, negotiate contracts, buy properties. But this," she gestured toward the room, "this is different. You made it real. You gave it purpose," he said. "I gave it money. You gave it hands. You gave it heart." He crossed the room without thinking and stopped just in front of her. "You didn't come to see it open." "I didn't know if I could." "Why?" She looked up at him. "Because if I walked in and saw what you'd built and realized I wanted to stay. I didn't know if I could be brave enough to admit it." "You're the bravest person I've ever met." She let out a shaky breath. "I've spent years avoiding anything I couldn't control, but I don't want to run from this. Not anymore." He reached for her hand. "Then don't." "I don't know how to do this," she said. "I've never had a real relationship, not one that wasn't built on expectations or appearances." "Then we figure it out together." She studied him, her fingers curling around his. "I don't want to be a billionaire in your world. I want to be someone who matters." "You already are," he said. The room around them blurred. The laughter, the footsteps, the movement, it all faded behind the weight of what lingered between them. "I love you," she said, voice low and certain. "I haven't said it before because I didn't want to scare you, or myself." Victor's eyes didn't flinch. "You didn't," her breath caught. "Because I love you too," he said. "And I think I have since the moment you didn't scream at me for dumping champagne on your dress." Raya laughed, but it broke halfway through, emotion catching in her throat. "That dress was awful. I've been meaning to thank it." She stepped into his arms and he held her there, the kind of embrace that made time irrelevant. When they pulled apart, she looked up at him with something new in her eyes, not just affection, not just admiration, certainty. Later that evening, after the kids had gone home and the last of the volunteers had left, Raya took Victor's hand and led him to the rooftop of the center. The city stretched beneath them, the skyline soft in the golden hour haze. She walked him to the edge where a table had been set, candles flickering in glass jars, 2 plates waiting beneath silver domes, and a bottle of red wine breathing beside them. A string quartet played softly from a speaker tucked into the corner. He blinked. "What is this?" "My turn," she said. "To show you something." She lifted the lid on one of the plates. It wasn't hot cuisine. It was 2 perfectly grilled cheeseburgers and a bowl of sweet potato fries. "I told the chef exactly what I wanted," she said. "No substitutions." Victor laughed and pulled out a chair. "You think this is how normal people date?" "I have no idea," she said. "But I like it." They ate slowly, watching the sun dip behind the buildings. When the last bite was gone, she stood and pulled him to his feet. "I have one more surprise." He followed her to the far end of the rooftop, where a small door opened into a private glass room. Inside, the lights dimmed automatically, and the floor glowed beneath their feet with scattered constellations. She walked to a console on the wall and pressed a single button. The ceiling above them retracted. Stars blinked overhead, the sky clear for once, the city hushed below. Victor turned to her. "Is this real?" "All of it," she said. He pulled her close, one arm around her waist, the other brushing a loose strand from her face. "Then let's stop pretending we're from different worlds." She nodded. "Let's build one together." He kissed her, slow and full, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything except everything. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" she whispered. "We go home," he said, "together. And tomorrow," he smiled, "we wake up to Parker demanding pancakes and you complaining about strawberry syrup being too sweet." She laughed softly. "And after that, we keep building." The stars above them flared brighter, or maybe it just felt that way. Either way, they stayed there, two people who had nothing in common on paper, but everything in their hearts wrapped in each other, no longer afraid of what came next. Because they had already found the only thing that mattered, each other. Victor adjusted the collar of his button-down shirt as he stepped into the Carter Foundation's Midtown headquarters, Parker's hand clasped tightly in his. The boy's eyes widened as they entered the sunlit atrium, its glass ceiling towering above them like a cathedral of steel and light. He whispered a quiet "whoa" as they passed a suspended sculpture made of recycled circuit boards and fiber optics. "Is this a spaceship?" Parker asked, tugging at Victor's wrist. Victor chuckled. "Feels like it, doesn't it?" Raya was waiting for them past the curved reception desk, dressed in a tailored forest green dress that fell just below her knees, her heels silent on the polished floor. When she saw them, her expression lifted not with surprise or relief, but with the quiet joy of someone who'd been waiting not patiently but hopefully. "You made it," she said, crouching to Parker's level. "You're right on time." Victor gave her a look. "He insisted we be early. Said he didn't want to miss anything important looking." Parker puffed out his chest. "I want to see the robot room." Raya stood, grinning. "Then follow me, Mr. Sullivan. The innovation lab awaits." Victor followed her through the building, past employees who all greeted Raya with a familiarity that suggested she'd long since shed any aloof reputation. No one flinched when she bent to tie Parker's shoelace herself, or when she paused to ask an intern about their latest design prototype. The woman who walked these halls wasn't the one from the Gala. She belonged here not just in name, but in presence. The lab doors opened into a sprawling workspace alive with movement. Teens in safety goggles clustered around 3D printers, blueprints were spread across long tables, and drones buzzed overhead in a designated flight cage. It was a place of chaos, but the energizing kind. Parker ran ahead, eyes wide, as Raya guided Victor to a quieter corner. "I want you to see something," she said, tapping a tablet and bringing up a blueprint. "It's the next center, Brooklyn, then after that Philly, then Detroit." Victor leaned in, scanning the designs. "This is more than just parks and after-school programs. It's infrastructure, a network. I'm not just funding them, I want them built by people who understand what it means to need them." She turned to him. "I want you to run it with me," his breath caught. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership." He stared at the plans, then at her. "You sure this is what you want? I've spent years surrounded by people who told me what I should want. This," she gestured between them, "is the first thing I've chosen entirely for myself." He was quiet for a long moment. "What would it mean, us working together like that?" "It means we build lives the same way we built that playground, piece by piece, side by side." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm in." Later that week, as the sun dipped low over the Hudson, Victor stood at the edge of a rooftop garden he'd never known existed. String lights crisscrossed overhead, and a long table was set for dinner, nothing extravagant, just roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and Parker's favorite, garlic rolls the size of baseballs. Raya appeared beside him, barefoot now, her heels abandoned somewhere near the elevator. She carried 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. "Tell me," she said, her voice softer than the breeze, "if someone had told you 6 months ago you'd be here, would you have believed them?" "I wouldn't have believed I'd still have electricity," he said, raising his glass. "Let alone this," she laughed quietly. "You saved me from something, you know." He turned to her. "I think you were doing fine on your own." "I wasn't," she said. "I was surviving, but you reminded me how to live." He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "We do that for each other, then." "Correct," Parker called from the table, waving a breadstick. "You're both my people now." Victor grinned. "That's it. You've been officially adopted into the club." Raya leaned her head against his shoulder. "Think he'd mind if we made it official?" Victor blinked. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him fully, eyes bright. "I mean I want to build a life, not just a foundation, not just a program, a life with you." He didn't hesitate. "Then let's do it." She exhaled, and the tension she'd carried for years, the weight of legacy, of image, of control, seemed to fall away. That weekend, in a quiet garden behind the community center they'd built together, they exchanged vows in front of the few people who mattered most. Parker handed Victor the ring with all the solemnity of a best man twice his age, and when Victor slipped it onto Raya's finger, he whispered, "You changed everything." She smiled through tears. "So did you." There were no fireworks, no press, no designer gowns. Just wildflowers, laughter, and the kind of promises that didn't need fanfare to be real. Years later, their names were etched into a plaque outside the largest youth innovation campus in the Northeast. But what mattered more than the buildings or the cities or the legacy was that they always came home together. To dinner tables filled with stories. To a son who never once doubted he was loved. To a partnership that wasn't about balance sheets or status, but about choosing each other every day. And when Parker stood in front of his middle school class and was asked what his parents did for a living, he didn't talk about foundations or money. He said, "They build things. They build people. They build love." And he wasn't wrong.